The big framing for me is that I learned to succeed as an introvert, and I will tell you that most people think that introversion is a disadvantage when it comes to selling, to networking. I actually realize that we have a real edge as long as we realize that we can't behave extroverted, that we systemize out our disadvantages while leveraging our strengths. And planning and preparation really allow us to leverage our major strengths of active listening and empathy, which some might say extroverts aren't quite as good as us at.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Matthew Pollard is author of The Introvert's Edge, Amazon's 8th most sold book of the week. Matthew, welcome to the show.
I'm ecstatic to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey man, the pleasure's mine. In 90 seconds or less, can you tell me where did you start, where are you now, and how did you get there?
Oh, in 90 seconds or less. Well, introverted kid, reading speed of a 6th grader, horrible acne, no business being in sales, fell into sales as a result of losing my job just before Christmas. 93 doors before my first sale. It was a horrific day of getting sworn at and getting told to get a real job. Went home, taught myself how to sell watching YouTube videos, became the #1 salesperson in the company in about 6 weeks. Fast forward just shy of a decade, I'd been responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories. And the big framing for me is that I learned to succeed as an introvert. And I will tell you that most people think that introversion is a disadvantage when it comes to selling, to networking. I actually realize that we have a real edge as long as we realize that we can't behave extroverted, that we systemize out our disadvantages while leveraging our strengths. And planning and preparation really allow us to leverage our major strengths of active listening and empathy, which some might say extroverts aren't quite as good as us at. And that's really, what got me to where I am today. I moved to the US. I started teaching people how to create rapid growth businesses by differentiating, by creating a niche strategy, and by creating a sales system that works. Some of those people in the syndication space. And really that's what's allowed me to continue my mission of helping introverts realize they're not second-class citizens. Their path to success is just different to that of an extrovert.
Can you define for me? Because I'm not sure that even everybody has a clear understanding of the difference between an extrovert and an introvert.
It's actually interesting. I think that psychologists have been paid a fortune in research grants to make it more complicated, not less so. And so the classic introvert, you would assume, is not either you or I, Sam. The classic introvert would be that person hiding under the bridge. And I promised that I would out you as an introvert on this show. So there you go. So, and this is the biggest thing that I focus on, that most people perceive the introvert as the quiet person that doesn't want to talk to anyone. And what you may be experiencing right now is what you would perceive as perhaps two very articulate people having a dialogue about a topic that they, if they were true introverts, they wouldn't be able to have. And that's the mistake that everybody makes. Introversion has got nothing to do with your ability to succeed in being a podcast host, being a podcast guest, speaking from stage, networking, selling, any other so-called extroverted arena you think. As a matter of fact, I think that introverts dominate in all of those as long as they've got a great system and they do planning and preparation previously. The difference is that after those activities, we're exhausted, where an extrovert is buzzing, they're charged up, and they want to go to the next so-called extroverted behavior. So the thing that I will say that separates us, and the best example I can give you is I run an event in Austin called Small Business Festival. And, Jim Cathcart, #1 most award-winning speaker in the world, is a friend of mine. He came down, he's like, Matt, I'm going to be a closing speaker, and I'm coming down for the full 3-day period. At the end of that 3 days, he and I had been involved in the event. We'd hung out with people. We'd interviewed people from stage. We'd both spoken. The difference was at the end, he was charged up and wanted to go and experience Rainy Street in the city of Austin, the live music capital of the world. I wanted to put on a hoodie and watch Netflix and maybe cry a little bit by myself and talk to nobody. I've never in my life had to ask a 7-year-old if I could please go home. I was tired, ever. But that was the time. He was so charged up because he had 3 days of charge. I had 3 days of using my charge. That's all introversion is. It's got nothing to do with what we can achieve.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's the definition I was hoping you were going to give, because it's absolutely true. I mean, yeah, I run a daily podcast. I'm doing 12 interviews today. And let me tell you, this is all I do on Tuesdays, this interview. And when Tuesdays are over, I'm spent. Like I go home. Like I really don't get any other work done on Tuesday. It's like I'm exhausted. I'm just exhausted. And I had a great day. I had a great time conversing with people like yourself all day long. I get to meet the brightest and best minds in real estate every Tuesday all over the country. It's amazing, and it wears me out. That's just the way it is.
And you own that, and that's the important thing. I think a lot of people either get embarrassed by that. Now, truthfully, you have a ton of advantages being an introvert. And extroverts, I don't want to be perceived as extrovert bashing. Sure. Extroverts have a ton of advantages too. The goal is that you have to understand you have strengths and weaknesses, and you have to leverage your strengths while learning how to improve on your weaknesses. And right. The difference is an extrovert will go and learn how to actively listen, or they'll go and learn how to empathize better. An introvert believes that they can't. And that's really where the biggest hurdle is. And I will tell you, Sam, I actually batch my interviews too. For my podcast, The Introvert's Edge, right. I batch interview over a 2-day period, the entire series every time I launch one, because I don't want to do it again for another long period.
That's awesome. I absolutely love it. Let's talk about achieving rapid growth. So I know that's one of the things you're well known for. Break down that process for me, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing for people to understand when it comes to rapid growth is that most people are amazing at their functional skill. But rapid growth has nothing to do with your functional skill. As a matter of fact, if you explain what you do as a functional skill, then people are less likely to want to work with you. So what I really highlight for people is there's 3 steps to rapid growth that are outside the scope of your functional skill. If you can nail these 3 and do them well, then you really can create a rapid growth business that you deserve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example that's kind of outside your industry, but I want to tell you that I actually applied this to a syndication business that's a feature in my new book, The Introvert's Edge to Networking, and he was able to obtain rapid growth really, really easily. But the key was, by the way, don't call yourself a syndication specialist. If that's what you are, don't say it. To everyone that's not in syndication, it sounds like a Ponzi scheme, like a scam, like I'm going to give you my money and you're going to run away from it. Away with it, I should say. Now, here's the thing that I will tell you. To everyone that knows what it is a really good way of making money, and it's a great way of leveraging income. But the truth is, the average person outside that, the only way you're going to be able to explain it to them is by educating them. That's like opening your fire hose of information. So you have to separate yourself from that industry, and you have to leverage the power of story to educate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example that does both. I'm going to show you how it applies, then I'll show you how it applies to syndication. But I'm also going to leverage the power of story, because especially for those introverts out there, story does a few amazing things. The first thing it does is it activates the reticular activating system of our brain, which for an introvert that struggles to develop rapport, it allows my brain to synchronize with the brains of everybody that's listening. It creates artificial rapport that I can leverage into real rapport. Super powerful, and it allows me to foster a relationship with everybody that's listening. Now, this is really, really powerful as well, because people buy from people that they like. But it also, for an introvert and for extroverts that feel like they need to educate, it stops us putting so much jargon into the explanation. So leave your brochures, leave your manuals and your jargon talk at home. Tell a story instead. The second thing that I will tell you is when you tell a story, people remember up to 22 times more information. So my goal of sharing this story with you is also that you retain it, that you remember it, and you actually apply the advice that I'm about to give you. And then thirdly, and I think this is the most powerful, it actually short circuits the logical part of your brain. So when you hear a story, your emotional part of the brain is what hears a story. The logical part has no way of processing it. So it literally short circuits your emotional brain, goes story time, and it listens. So the difference here is that if you try to give somebody jargon 6 seconds until they're bored, you tell someone a story, they're going to listen for 2 or 3 minutes, and they're only going to listen for whether the moral applies to them, which is even better because they assume all the detail is fact. So because of that, it gives you a huge advantage over everybody else, especially in the investment space where they're just overwhelming. Everybody in the industry just overwhelms people with jargon. So the example I'll give you is actually of a language tutor that was out of California. And she taught kids and adults Mandarin. And for the longest time, she was able to charge $50 to $80 an hour for private consultation. Now, she did that successfully until there were a whole bunch of people moving into California willing to charge $30 to $40 an hour for private consultation. On top of that, we now live in this global economy. There were people in China offering to do it for $12 an hour on Craigslist, and technology that says, hey, I'll charge you nothing. You teach me English, I'll teach you Mandarin. We just, no one charges anyone anything. So she's competing against free. So she comes to me and she says, how do I compete in this crowded marketplace? What she's looking for is how to sell more effectively. But the key is that if you start with sales you've already lost, what I said is we've got to avoid the battle altogether. So I looked at all the things she did for her clients outside the scope of her functional skill. And what I realized is for 2 of these clients, and literally she'd worked with hundreds, it was just 2, she helped them understand some pretty important things. These were executives being relocated to China. Now, the first thing she helped them understand was the importance of rapport. Like here, if I was a really bad salesperson, at the end of 45 minutes, I might say, do you want to move forward? And you'll say yes, no, or everyone's favorite. Let me think about it. Well, if I come back a week from now and you still say you want to think about it, you're probably not going to go ahead. In China, they're going to want to see you 5 or 6 times before they discuss business. They're probably going to want to see you drunk over karaoke once or twice. It's just the kind of people that they are. But that's because they're talking 25 to 100-year relationships, not transactional deals like we do here. She helped them understand that, the importance of e-commerce, or the differences between e-commerce in China and the Western world, and the importance of respect, why learning the language isn't enough. You've got to reduce your accent, how to handle a business card, and why it mattered. These are the things that were significant to these 2 clients. And I said, when are you doing so much more for these people than just language tuition? What are you doing? Now, in syndication, everyone has their own unique skills, their own things that they bring to the marketplace that they struggle to articulate. Otherwise, you won't have clients that keep coming back to you. And she said, look, they're just a few things. I'm just trying to help. But I'm like, you're stuck in your functional skill. Is it fair to assume as a result of the assistance that you're giving these people, they're going to be more successful in China? And she's like, yeah, that's the point, right? I said, great. Let's call you the China Success Coach then. Forget about Mandarin for a second. Let's focus on creating what we ended up calling the China Success Intensive, which was a 5-week program to work with the executive, the spouse, and any children being relocated to China. Now, she loved the idea of this, but she's like, well, who do I sell it to? And I said, well, who do you think your ideal client is? What she's asking is, who do I go out networking to find, right? Now, everyone assumes the biggest group. So I said, well, who do you think you're supposed to sell this to? And she said, well, obviously the executive. And I'm like, yeah, I was terrified moving from Australia to the US. Imagine going to China where they speak a different language. Still not your ideal client though. She's like, well, the companies are going to pay. And I'm like, yeah, they got millions of dollars riding on an executive being successful. Fair assessment. Still, I don't think so. Frustrated, she's like, well, who then? I said, I think your ideal client's the immigration attorney. She looked at me puzzled. She's like, what? I said, well, you think about this for a second. An immigration attorney gets paid $5,000 to $7,000 for doing a visa, doing all the paperwork and bureaucracy that comes with it. They've got staff, they've got office space, they've got to pay to get a client. They'd be lucky to make $3,000. I said, so just offer them $3,000 for a simple introduction. They were like, double my profit for a simple introduction? Sure, what have I got to say? These people were ecstatic to meet her at a networking event. She said, well, all you've got to do is say, congratulations, you've now got a visa. I just want to double check you're as ready as possible to be relocated to China. These people, pretty confident, they'd say, yeah, I think we're set. We got our place sorted. We're learning the language. Kids are getting pretty good at it too. We've got our visa now, thank you. I think we're good to go. And they just respond with, there's actually a lot more to it than that. I think you need to speak to the China Success Coach. She'd then get on the phone with the easiest sale in the world. Now, put this in perspective. She charged $30,000 for doing this. She paid a $3,000 commission for this 5-week program. She made $27,000 for the easiest sale in the world. Instead of struggling every day to charge $50 to $80 an hour, she had a business that exploded. Now, how do you apply this to the syndication space? Simple. You first need to decide that there's a niche for you. I worked with a client recently who specialized or had a lot of clients in the medical space, surgeons, people that were, highly specialized doctors. And if you feel sorry for, just so you know, you're supposed to feel sorry for these people because they spend a fortune learning, then they get into their career and they put themselves in golden handcuffs. They've got expensive lives, expensive spouses, their kids are going to expensive schools. They have no idea how they're ever going to retire. The thing they do have is a huge income, but they invest it in things like condos and triplexes. The problem is that usually they end up the landlord and the hourly rate's horrible, and the properties, because they've got less time to look than everyone else, they usually lose money, not make money. So they give up on all that. That was the group that he cared about. Though he sold it to everyone, I said, specialize here. Then we can frame the messaging different. We actually called him the arbitrage architect. Why? Well, arbitrage means buy low and sell high. Well, if you can buy things low in a way that nobody else can, i.e. if you've got a high income that allows you or affords you the opportunity to be involved in a syndication, a much smaller group, so it's more manageable and more profitable, well, of course, you're basically making money out of arbitrage. So we created the unified message of the arbitrage architect. We then niched down to doctors and surgeons, and then we created a sales system that leveraged the power of relationships through other surgeons and messaging out to surgeons and doctors. That's what created his rapid growth business. Funnily enough, as soon as he started doing it, well, the people that knew him were like, what are you doing? You're a syndication specialist. Just stick to that. Even his father-in-law thought he was insane. He actually had a doctors association in Canada reach out to me like, you know what? We need someone to speak to our doctors. Can you work with us and help us with that? He had a dream set of clients. Now he has no problem raising money, and all the choice deals get given to him first because they know who he is. He breaks through the noise. So if you focus on these steps, firstly, sales, step 3 is a lot easier, but gosh, you stop feeling like you're having to convince and cajole people to do what's in their best interest.
Yeah, I like that. That's absolutely right. And I think you started with something there at the beginning was leverage the story. You know, like any good brand leverages the story. I don't know if you've ever done a whiskey tour, right? I remember I was on the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky, and it's like, man, everybody's in the end, it's the same, almost the same, the same product. Okay, all the bourbon drinkers like, no, it's not. I'm gonna get a bunch of hate email. But seriously, in the end, they've always got some founding story, and the whole thing is about the story and how special the water is and how special the grains and what it's like. Okay,
oh, I'm with you. How many times have we gone to a winery and actually had pretty bad wine, but then we bought a bottle because the story was so great. We felt connected to this bottle of wine. It was nowhere near as good as a bottle half the price from California that we could have got at home.
Right, exactly. You're like, gosh, is this a $6 bottle or a $2? I don't have any idea. This is not good though. I know that. Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's why I never need to go on a whiskey tasting tour ever again. It's like, this is, I've heard the story. Thank you. But still, even so, I liked really what you said there of leverage the story. What are some things that people should do, I guess, to begin, finding their unique story? Like for you, I think it sounded like it came from the experience of identifying yourself as an introvert. Going, okay, you know what? I'm an introvert, and this does not come naturally or easy for me. And I think you built upon that. What can other people do to really find their way of leveraging their story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we need to do is you need to say, what are the skills that I have outside the scope of my functional skill? And then say, well, what is the higher level benefit of that? So for Wendy, it was e-commerce, understanding of respect, understanding of rapport. The high level benefit was China success. For Shane, who became the arbitrage architect, it was the fact that he understood what doctors were going through, how to find deals, how to raise the money, how to connect with those right people. And then, the arbitrage architect became the perfect fit for him because he understood what they were going through. He understood that while wealthy, they were actually stuck in golden handcuffs and they were trying to invest. It's funny, we came up with this slogan, stop investing like a poor person, right? Because the whole framing was around these super rich, egocentric kind of individuals that knew that they should be able to get access to something that everyone else didn't. They just couldn't find it. So it was a really easy fit. For me, I went, well, hang on a second. I learned to sell as an introvert, yes. But then I started my own businesses. And I realized that if you start with sales, you've already lost. So I actually learned to market. By the way, salespeople tend to be underdegree qualified people or people that aren't seen as highly qualified. Marketers, on the other hand, are highly qualified, but have never had a relationship with a customer. They don't really go and speak to customers. So salespeople tend to hate marketers, and marketers tend to devalue what's going on in the sales team. I actually was able to play in both spheres. Because of that, I actually had the ability to communicate between. So most people that are in small business, they generally have to hire a sales coach, then they have to hire a marketing specialist, and neither of them are actually connecting the dots for the other. Then the world went online. So I went, well, I understand sales and marketing offline. That's how I grew my businesses. And then I moved them online. And more specifically, I learned to move them online and realized that while everybody else was blogging every day, podcasting every day, taking photos of their donut for something to say on Instagram, because their focus was to be the loudest, I realized that if you were the clearest, i.e. you had a great message, you didn't need to be the loudest. You could optimize and even automate to break through the noise, i.e. in networking and online, if you're can be the clearest, you don't have to be the loudest. By bringing all of this together, online and offline marketing and sales and the psychology, because truthfully, look, I've learned you can create a rapid growth business out of anything. I built 5 multi-million-dollar businesses myself from the ground up, and the thing I can tell you is there's nothing worse than a rapid growth business with customers you can't stand, a business you don't like. So it's also ensuring that you actually create the right rapid growth business as opposed, and trust me, you'll make more money if you focus on a business you're actually passionate about too. Now, most people in the syndication space are so focused on the money, but there is a passion behind it. They just are so logical and so practical minded or so focused on making money, they don't take time to think about it and learn how to articulate it. My realization that no one else does this stuff made me realize that what my higher level benefit was yes, I was passionate about helping introverts, passionate about helping service provider businesses more specifically than all businesses in general. And what I realized is I had a unique competency which was twofold. One was that I had the ability to help a business create rapid growth, but also had the ability for a business owner to help a business owner obtain rapid growth in their mindset, their focus, the business that they were going to create. So they actually created the business, the rapid growth business that they love, as opposed to the rapid growth business that pays really well, but makes them suicidal. So I called myself the rapid growth guy because it encapsulated that. By the way, the first time I told a friend, unified message is the last thing you should tell somebody else. It's like walking up to someone and saying, hey, Sam, I know you've called me Matthew my whole life. From now on, I want you to call me Tom. It just feels weird. Like the first time I said to someone, call me the rapid growth guy, it was a friend of mine that was a sales trainer. And by the way, you don't want to call yourself a commodity, right? When I called myself a sales trainer, people looked at me like I was one step above a scam artist. When I called myself a marketer, they're like, oh, I need that. How much do you cost? Now I'm talking about price. But when I said to a friend, I call myself the rapid growth guy now, he looked at me and was like, Matt, what are you doing? I mean, you sound like a male enhancement drug and not a good one, right? So for me, it was about making sure that I shared it with new people. Shane, the first time he called himself the arbitrage architect, people looked, his father-in-law was like, oh my gosh, I think you've hit your head, right? But now he's got a rapid growth business. So the advice I would give you is look at the skill sets. Every single person, yes, you do syndication or you do property, but everyone has unique experiences, unique past customers, unique qualifications, unique passions and missions that perfectly qualify them to help a demographic and that provide them unique skills in order to help them with. But here's what I'll say. You don't need to hire me to figure it out. I actually have a 5-step template that I give away. You can go to matthewpollard.com/growth, and there you can download the template. And it literally walks you through the steps of creating your own unified message and discovering your own niche of willing to buy clients. It's funny, I did this at the National Freelance Conference, and this sounds amazing until I tell you the second part. At the end of the 45-minute session, I said, who here now has a unified message they believe will excite and inspire prospects to want to know more? So when they introduce themselves at a networking event, people don't look at you like you're a scammer or say, oh, I need that, how much do you cost? But actually just intrigued to want to know more. But also they've identified a niche of people that are willing to pay them what they're worth. And like 97% of the room put their hands up. But as I said, sounds great until I tell you this. I said, people, keep your hands up if this is the most time you spent actively working on your marketing since you started your business. Now, the key word is actively. You might have read some marketing books, read them and then read the next book. I mean, these people that read 100 books a year and apply none drive me crazy. So the thing that I will tell you is that these people, 85% of the room kept their hands up that this is the most time they've spent actively working on their marketing since they started their business. So the key thing is this template works if you spend the time doing it. And what I would suggest to people that are listening is team up with somebody that's not in the syndication space at all. Find a hairdresser friend, a florist friend, a lawyer friend, somebody that is not your ideal customer, but also not somebody that works in your industry, because they'll get you out of your industry jargon. And you won't be selling to them in the process, right? But focus with somebody and maybe get them to listen to this podcast. I'm sure Sam would appreciate you getting them to listen to this podcast anyway, but get them to listen to this podcast and then download the template and spend an hour and a half on them and then get them to spend an hour and a half on you. And you'll easily come up with a niche that makes sense because they'll hold you accountable to realizing that if you speak to far less people, you become the only logical choice as opposed to having more opportunity where nobody really takes you seriously or wants to work with you. So they will force you to make a decision, and then you'll be able to work through what the higher level benefit of that is. And the template will take you through all of that. So go and download the template at MatthewPollard.com/growth, and that'll really take you through every step you need to create the message and find the niche.
Matthew, thank you for taking the time to come on today. This has certainly been informative and insightful. Have really appreciated everything you've shared with us. My last question is typically, how do we get in touch with you? But it sounds like you've just showed us, MatthewPollard.com. Thank you again for coming on today. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Yeah, absolutely. For the introverts that are listening, you don't need to buy my book either to learn how to sell or network as an introvert. I'm really conscious of trying to make sure that introverts get over that belief that they can actually sell and network. So you can actually download the first chapters of my book at theintrovertsedge.com. You can get the sales book there, theintrovertsedge.com/networking. And that'll get you the first chapters. The sales book, for instance, I actually will help you overcome your belief you can sell and give you the full 7 steps. If you do nothing more than put what you currently say into those 7 steps, you'll realize there's some things out of order. You can fix that. There's some things that don't fit. That'd be all the jargon that you tell the client. You should throw that out. And then you'll realize that there's some gaping holes, like asking great questions and telling great stories. If you just do that, you'll double your sales in the next 60 days. So whichever you want to focus on, networking or sales, there's a book for you.
Fantastic. Matthew, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Cheers.